Aloha, I'm Eva Andrade. I'm the president and CEO of Hawaii Family Forum. And on this episode of Faith in Politics, we are going to continue waiting as the United States continues to wait after the November 3rd election. So let's chat about that. Today we're so pleased and honored once again to have a distinguished panel of gentlemen who bring with them a lot of years of experience and knowledge. We've got James Aiona, who is lovingly known as Duke, a retired attorney, retired judge in the state of Hawaii, also our past lieutenant governor in the state of Hawaii. We've got Jim Hochberg, who is the Alliance Defending Freedom attorney, also local attorney, been fighting religious freedom here in Hawaii for many, many years. So we're pleased to have him back. And we also have retired Judge Elwin Ahu, who is not only a retired judge, he is also a pastor, and he's going to be bringing his mana'o to the show today. So, gentlemen, welcome back.
Welcome back.
So, as you know, the election happened. And the United States is now in waiting mode. And this waiting mode, we're being told, could be weeks. It could even be months. I mean, nobody is able to say how long this waiting is going to be. But before we jump into some of the election, I'd like to get your overall thoughts and feelings now that the election is over. Duke, let's start with you.
Well, I think the first positive or good takeaway from this election, this general election, was the voter turnout. So across the country, you had more people voting, which is always a good thing. That means more people are engaged, and that's what it's all about. So I'll leave it at that. That's the first takeaway.
I like it. You're starting on a positive note. This is good.
Well, the second takeaway, and this might not be as positive, but was the process itself and the glitches that we had, not only here in Hawaii, but across the country. I got to admit, I got a lot excited. I wanted, this is like an event, right? I mean, it's more than an event. This is our democracy at work, right? And I believe in America, and I believe in our institutions, and I believe in our voting process. So I hunkered down maybe about 4 o'clock, 3 o'clock. I can't remember Hawaii time. It was still light, I know that. And I was riveted to what I was watching, and next thing you know, it's like 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock Hawaii time, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock Eastern time, and there were 5 states. There's 5 states that are at play, and they just shut down the process. They said, we're calling it a night, and we're coming back, I think they said in the morning, and we will continue counting votes. Meanwhile, Hawaii hasn't even started to show its results because there are still people in line up until 11 o'clock. But they forged through, and all votes were counted. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, all votes were counted by 2 o'clock in the morning. So I'm a little dismayed. So I wake up this morning, and I think it was about 6 o'clock our time, so that would be, 12 o'clock Eastern time. And 2 states that were, for one candidate are now flipped for another candidate. So it's like,
So in other words,
what is going on?
Even while people are listening to this right now, they could be changing, right? We could go back in and it could flip again.
Right.
And we will get a little bit more
so
into detail.
My second takeaway, and I'm sure everybody will join in after this, is that the process wasn't very good.
Jim.
My first takeaway is I am tired.
I'm sure the entire United States agrees with you on this.
But it was a very interesting campaign season. It was very different than a lot of the past ones. And I'm in my 60s, so I've been voting since I think Jimmy Carter's 1976 election. This one was really different from the perspective of the lead up, talking about it, the changing of rules after voting started, the starting early, the super reliance on mail-in, non-absentee requested ballots, which is an odd new thing. So there were a lot of things to be watching and paying attention to and trying to figure out what was going on. And then, of course, like you said, we end up staying up really, really late. So my first takeaway is I am really tired.
Okay. Pastor Elwin.
It's the first time I heard an attorney be so honest about his feelings.
This
The
election has
wall is
just
down.
changed us
The
all.
wall is down.
The wall.
But I'm glad you said that because, here's my honest reaction. Call it election anxiety,
Post-traumatic stress disorder.
pre-traumatic and post-traumatic.
Yes, yes.
Just so many things that are happening, and just trying to digest it and internalize it, and then to deal with it for myself, not only on the political, legal side of my mind, but also the spiritual side of my mind, and the responsibility I have for the church and helping people to navigate through something like this. And so, I've been giving messages, and we've been praying on unity and just letting God be in control of all things. And yet I wake up yesterday morning and I said to my wife, man, I got election anxiety, I think. And, and she goes, well, aren't you telling people that they should be praying and trusting God? I said, yeah, I have to, because I got to talk to myself about that. So as I'm preaching to the people, I'm actually preaching to myself. A lot of things that is beyond your control. And so that's what gives us this sense of anxiousness. We wish we could control the polling. You can't. You wish you can control the process, and you can't. I'm a big believer in process and integrity. If there's a process and there's integrity to the process, people can trust that. It brings peace.
Well, I think that's the real question, right? Is that people know they trust God, but people don't trust men. And that's what's happening, right, in all of these states that we're talking about. So I want to just latch onto that for a second. So one of the reasons there's so much confusion going on in this voting is because the state legislators are the ones that come up with the rules for voting in their states, correct? So it's not like there's a one law fits all. So some of this craziness is because of the legislature. So again, why we talk so much about why it's important to stay plugged in, make sure people are voting, and you're staying connected with your legislators. So let's talk about the Hawaii election briefly before we go into the national craziness. So let's talk about the Hawaii election. So any surprises, Duke, on the Hawaii election scene?
Well, the only surprise, and really not a surprise, maybe for me, I knew voter turnout would be greater, would be more than in the past. I didn't think it would get to 60%. I thought it'd be still in the 50%, but that's a good thing, okay?
What does that tell you, though, that 40% of the population is still not voting? They're mailed the ballots now. There's social media going crazy with all the different candidates. There are voter guides being put out by everybody and their grandmother. Why do you think, and I'm sorry to go off, but why are 40% of the people of Hawaii still not engaged?
No, I think it's like the rest of the just America in general. We're in that stage right now of dependency, right? And when we're in that stage of dependency, you're oblivious to the civic process, right? And so as a result of that, and you're thinking about entitlements also, right? So I'm entitled to everything, so I don't need to vote, or not even thinking about voting, not saying that they don't say I need to vote. They're not even thinking or engaged in the civic process, right? Okay, so that's number one. So that's my response to your question. Why do you say 40% is still not voting? Simply because they're just not engaged. They're just occupied with other things, or they're just thinking about themselves. Of the 65% that voted, the question should also be, how many of it was really informed voting? I can't tell you how many people called me up and asked me, who do I vote for? Who do I vote for this office? And what are these amendments all about? And that's why when I saw that line last night, I'm thinking to myself, first of all, okay, where did all these people come from? Because remember, it's a mail-in, it's a mail-in process. And I heard one pundit say, well, next time what we need to do is have more polling places. And I went, wait a minute. You guys, this is a mail-in process. What do you want more polling places for? If anything, there should be no polling places, because that's what Oregon does.
Well, I guess
they
because
have no polling places.
There was some concern, right, with the long lines, right? So at 7 o'clock at, Kapolehale, there were people like,
or both.
Hundreds,
Honolulu
right?
as well as Kapolehale. The neighbor islands had no problems with that. But like I said, if it's a true mail-in process, why do you have polling places? So it's really not a truly a mail-in process, right? It's a hybrid, if so to speak. But it goes to show you how many people are still skeptical about this process.
Yeah.
Because I heard people last night saying that. They said, well, I stood in line for 3 hours because I don't trust the mail. I don't trust the people who are counting it and verifying signatures, right? Which is pretty much not just in Hawaii, but as Jim pointed out, they've changed the rules in a lot of states regarding absentee ballots, and that's where the hangup is going to be for many states, and this is why this process is going to be dragged out.
And Jim, what about for you? Anything surprising on the Hawaii landscape?
I'm very disappointed that all 4 charter amendments passed, because I personally had decided to vote against all
And
4
passed
for
quite-
pretty deep reasons.
Quite highly they passed, too,
yeah,
the
and
percentage.
You know, I don't want to, but I think it's because of a lack of knowledge of the amendments, Jim.
a lot of people called and asked me too.
Well, I know. Just think about it.
No, I know.
People voted for
And-
that second amendment, which was about the youth commission.
Yeah, we don't need it.
How many people were thinking about, okay, what's the cost of this?
What's the
Is this
purpose of it?
Yeah,
How
what's
does
the
it work?
purpose and what's
the process?
Another layer of what? Of government and exactly what are they going to accomplish that other, you know, especially during these very, very trying times economically, right?
Yeah.
Do
And
we
there-
really need this?
There was
And
a
but
surprising...
The thing too, though, is with the way amendments to founding documents go here in Hawaii, election after election after election, we tend to approve them.
Yeah.
And I know most voters don't do the homework that I do, because most voters aren't lawyers. And when you look at the question on the ballot, you have no idea what it is. Where did it come from? You got to look at the resolution or the bill that created it. And sometimes that doesn't even answer the question. You actually have to talk to the people in the legislative body that dealt with it to find out, you know, why are we trying to take the Ethics Commission budget out of the Department of Corporation Counsel? I could find nothing in the resolution about that. And it's behind the scenes political stuff. So
Exactly.
we always tend to just vote yes here, which could be just a cultural thing. But I think it's also because voters don't realize that the citizens in Hawaii have significantly less political opportunities to exercise their power other than voting, that we should actually value our vote more than we do and not just rubber stamp this stuff. If the legislature and the city council weren't required by the Constitution to ask us to approve, they wouldn't bother. They do it with thousands of laws every year. They have to ask us because that's one of our very limited political powers. And we just rubber stamp stuff.
And we'll...
Isn't there an irony in there, though, in that conversation? Because on the one hand, we say that people don't trust the process. And that's why they show up at polling places, because they don't trust the mail, they don't trust all this and that. Yet on the other hand, we look at the results of these charter amendments and people vote yes, almost in a way they're saying, well, you guys must know what you're doing, so I'm just going to agree with it. So what I see and what I'm kind of taking away from all of this is a difference between responsibility and reaction. I think we have developed more of a reactionary kind of a culture versus one of civic responsibility. Civic responsibility, you understand your responsibility to vote. You have a duty to vote, and you go and exercise that. Versus reactionary, where, oh, you better go do this, you better go do that, and then, oh, okay, either I do or I don't.
Well, and the reason a lot of people don't vote is they mistakenly believe that it will put them on a jury pool, which isn't true.
That is
But
true.
I've heard that from
That is
so
true.
many people, because
that
I
is
do
true.
door-to-door canvassing, I do all that stuff. And people don't want to vote because they don't want to have to serve on a jury.
But I hear that. You know, speaking
And
of-
that's very reactionary.
Speaking of jury, you know, when you're selecting a jury, how many potential jurors in the jury pool, they say, you know, I cannot vote not guilty for this guy. He must be guilty, right? If there's smoke, there's fire. So reactionary versus having a responsibility to be impartial and to presume everyone, you know, innocent until proven guilty and all of that. So we kind of have developed this where, and I don't know what the reason is, lack of civic courses in school.
Oh, absolutely, that's a big part.
You look at in the home life. Having my son wash the dishes. He loves to cook, great. I love eating his food. clean up your dishes. But he won't clean it up as a sense of responsibility. He'll do it only if I tell him to do it.
Interesting.
And so, that's kind of a culture I think we're living in right now, and you're seeing that reflected in
Well, one thing you mentioned about social media, and this is why I would think there would be more people voting, and probably another reason why, is because social media now is direct, right? And it's instantaneous. And pretty much, I remember I went to Taiwan, when I went to Taiwan maybe about 15 years ago, whatever it was. It was a long time ago. And almost everyone had a cell phone. Well, that's second nature now for every country, I think every society. Everybody pretty much got a cell phone. So when you get these messages and you keep pounding these messages, it works on you, right? I mean, social media does control us. I mean, whether we want to admit that or not, it's a fact.
Which, on that note, I'd like to get your thoughts on this whole idea of Facebook and Twitter and all these guys now that are shutting down any kind of news that they feel is unfair or biased or whatever. So we have a group of men and women somewhere in a back room deciding what is good to be out there and what is not good to be out there. Let's start with you, Pastor Elwin. What do you think what do you think is really happening here when it comes to voting? Because people need this information to vote responsibly, right? So if half of it's being cut off, are they getting the information they need to vote responsibly?
I think it's even more subtle than, outright censoring of what you can post, what you shouldn't post, whatever. There's a movie out on Netflix, Social Dilemma.
Yes.
That is you have to watch that.
Yeah.
And right
Everybody
now it's
should.
kind of too late after the election, but it talks about the manipulation that social media does, and it's not an outright censoring. It's actually putting you in a corner, in an echo chamber, where now you've developed these attitudes and beliefs because you're hearing everybody agreeing with you, so therefore you must be right and you must be in the majority. And what it does, it creates all this division, because as you exist in this echo chamber, they exist in that one, but they don't know what they're talking about. They must be evil. And it just creates this uprising of negative feelings and reactionary actions. And so whether they're getting the information they need to cast an appropriate vote, they're in this echo chamber. It depends, and you can tell. When you talk to someone, you can tell what station they're listening
Absolutely.
to. Right?
Talking points.
You know
Yeah.
whether they're watching Fox News or CNN or CNBC or whatever. So
Or even Uncle John. I mean, nowadays people are like, hey, my brother would tell me this, and then it's fact all of a sudden. So it's interesting. Jim, your thoughts on this?
So I am economic conservative, so I would like the market to control the problem. That requires people canceling their subscriptions, which the reactionary nature of our current society, the handout nature of our current society, people aren't going to do it. That's too bad, because that's the most effective way to have a fair resolution of the problem. But if that's not going to happen, then what do? And that's when government gets in. I kind of think the government should take away protections that the tech media guys have under this Section 230 that allows them not to be considered publishers and therefore not responsible for what gets posted on their platforms. That should be taken away. If they do any kind of manipulation or censoring at all, and it needs to be very transparent, and the New York Times versus Sullivan rule, which says public figures cannot recover for defamation or damages for libel or slander unless they prove what's called actual malice by the publisher. That should be done away with for every small to big thing that happens in tech and media. What I mean as an example is, say Diamond Garcia didn't get elected. There's not a big money win to get for having been defamed in the process, so nobody's going to actually hire a lawyer and sue. But if you don't have to have damages if related to how it affected you, but you can get damages because the event happened, kind of like strict liability damages. And he could sue because somebody or the tech company manipulated his campaign messaging or whatever, and it's provable and that kind of a thing. They probably wouldn't do it because they also have shareholders that they're responsible for. So you take away the things that are protecting them from the market, since people aren't going to run the market on their own probably, except for me, because I already don't have any of that stuff anyway. And then you let unfortunately, some kind of a dispute resolution process make them pay, because they got to self-regulate. That's really the answer. They got to self-regulate somehow, and under the current situation, obviously they're not.
Okay, so if you put all of that together, basically what I'm trying to say is, and with what Pastor Elwin said in regards to the echo chamber, this is why I think more people should be voting, because they're constantly getting bombarded now with this message of civic responsibility, voting, et cetera, et cetera. And I think this is why more people should vote. But unfortunately we still didn't get our 70%, which I still don't think is good. I think if you get to you got to get to 90 really first. It's a success.
What was the percentage at statehood?
65.
The actual?
Hawaii was 65.
The voting. When we voted for statehood? I
Oh,
thought it was.
when we voted for statehood, yeah, it was almost
it was,
100.
yeah, it was
that's
quite
what
high.
we want.
Yeah, exactly. I mean,
It happened.
That's fully engaged.
So it's possible.
That's fully
Yes,
engaged.
yeah.
But all I'm trying to say is that it's the social media really does control in this day and age, as opposed to 20 years ago or 30 years ago. But as you mentioned, 40 years ago, 50 years ago, when we just started our statehood, we had 100%. What was it back then that compelled people to vote? Well, it was pride, it was responsibility.
There was a sense of unity too.
I mean,
I know that there were some people opposed to statehood. Let's be honest about that.
Oh,
but for
absolutely.
the most part, people
Absolutely.
were unified. That's what they wanted to happen, and so there was easy maneuvering through the election process, right?
Again, the importance of the understanding of responsibility versus reaction, being told that you need to do this. So at statehood, people felt, wow, we have now the right to vote. It's our responsibility. They proudly will do their homework and whatever. Go back to jury, right? You have a juror member who is there because, I guess I gotta be here. I mean, how much time and effort is he really gonna take in looking at the case and the facts, et cetera? Because we know that people who get indicted and get arraigned and all that, a lot of them are found not guilty. The fact that you get arrested and it doesn't mean that you're guilty, and the process, the integrity of the process has to kick in. And we always give the speech. We live in the best country in the world because of the jury process that we have.
Yeah, so we have a great system here, but unfortunately it's broken, right? And I mean, we really have to have a good group of people that are to look at these things that are not working. But I want to talk a little bit about this whole social media and the way that people are connected with, right? I mean, you can get somebody real easy, send them a text. But the pollsters were very wrong this election. They were wrong in 2016, and they were very wrong again this time. And regardless of what side you're rooting for to take the White House, everybody is questioning the results of these pollsters.
Well, in Hawaii, the Hawaii poll in regards to the mayor's race was pretty spot on. They predicted
and
a
the prosecutor's race,
they predicted
close.
a double-digit win by Blangiardi, and he won by 20%, close to 20%. So that was accurate.
So that's Hawaii pollsters, but national pollsters, when they've been telling us for weeks what the election was going to look like, we fast forward past November 3rd, and it didn't look anything like that. I think people were shocked. In fact, when we went to bed last night, some of these states that are still in question were leaning more Republican. They kind of were that peach color. Then we wake up this morning and now they're blue, right? Because of these.
Flipped, yeah.
So let's talk about that for a minute. So why do you think the pollsters got it so wrong when it's so easy to get a hold of people today? Let's start with you this time, Jim.
Okay, so you have to understand how polling is done, and I've never taken a statistics class in my life, but what I understand, what I'm going to say is correct. But if somebody knows that I actually am making a mistake, I apologize in advance. So in order to have a scientific poll, you have to have a broad enough population of people that you're asking the questions to, number one. So how do they come up with that? In the political thing, they look at the breakdown between parties of the voters last time, and they either agree that it's probably going to be the same ratio of Democrats to Republicans, or they disagree for whatever the reason is. But then they weight the grouping of people they're going to ask according to the percentage ratio they think is correct. So what that means is, if in Michigan the pollers assume there's going to be more Democrats voting by 15%, then they would weight the population of people they're going to ask the questions to, that 15% more of them are Democrats than Republicans. So if they get that wrong, then the whole thing's shot.
Well, see, that's what I guess people are frustrated because they saw this happen in 2016, right? There was this whole population of Trump voters that they just missed in those polls. And we fast forward to 2020 and it happens again. So with this formula you're talking about, why are they not getting it?
So that's only one of the parts of the thing. Then it's how the questions are worded. There's a science to, as lawyers know, asking a question to get the answer you need. And polls are freer to do that because we're either in a deposition, which is easier, or you're stuck with the testimony in court itself. But how you word the question is super important. And then in the last 4 years, if you don't want to be protested at your house, you don't want, groups of vandals wandering through your neighborhood because you're a Trump supporting neighborhood, you tend to hide behind the bushes, you keep quiet, you don't say. How is a pollster going to know whether you're telling the truth or not? They don't, right? I mean, so there's those 3 layers, and there's probably a whole bunch more. And there's also whether there's an honest intent behind the polling enterprise itself. If they are undertaking to do the poll in order to have numbers that will support their candidate so they can get it in the news and it will persuade other people to vote that way because they like to vote for the winner, then you have a polling regime that I think is malpractice, except that they're getting paid to do it for the campaign that they're hired to do, so it's really not.
So what do you think, Duke? Do you think that that the polling is going to change now because of they're getting attacked again for getting it wrong? So do you think they're going to change, and maybe in 2024
well, they're going to have to get it right if they want any sense or any semblance of credibility, right? Right now they have no credibility. So really, even in this election, I think many people were just ignoring polls. But part of the reason for why you have polls is it's also a tool politically, right, to suppress the vote. And so they put these polls out, right? And how many polls do you have? I mean, my God, there must be like across the country for the presidential election, there must have been well over 50 to 100 different types of polls that you had out there, right? And they're all, so you got to look at it that way. So myself personally, I paid no attention to the polls. I paid no attention to it whatsoever. And part of that is because of my experience as somebody who ran for office 4 times. So I kind of understand how it works and what you look for and what you don't look for. Likewise with candidates who work the ground, they'll tell you the ground game is really good. Trump said that a lot, right? The ground game is really true. You can get an indication from that, no doubt about it. But you can't say, yeah, that's why I'm going to win. Because I will tell you this, another fallacy here, especially here in Hawaii, is sign weaving. I hear a lot of candidates going, man, today was a great day. I got a lot of response from sign weaving. I got to break the bubble sometimes and say, in Hawaii, people are very kind. They'll wave back, okay?
I hear that all the time.
So don't take that as a vote, okay?
I wave at everybody.
But
I do.
I mean, but all I'm saying is that there's so many indications to it. The bottom line is you just got to get out there. And I believe that the reason why Trump did so well, and he did well, believe me, with everything thrown against him, he did really well, is because of messaging. He really did a better job of getting his message out, what he has accomplished, what he's going to do, etc. People, the majority of people who voted for Joe Biden, I'm going to tell you this, and I believe this is a fact. The majority of people who voted for Joe Biden didn't vote for Joe Biden.
They voted against Trump.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
Well, and I had people admit that to me, that,
Exactly.
it's not like they were really behind
Well, ask them,
Biden.
yeah.
Well, and some are. I mean, let's be fair. I mean, there's some people that are like, yeah, Biden could do a lot for the country.
Like
but
what?
you're right.
But like what? You ask, if you drill down on it, ask them like, okay, what is he going to do?
Well,
They couldn't respond.
We talked about that on the show with the millennials when we had them. It's like, people are so into talking points, right? Get people to talk more about what it is that they're trying to say. I think that's important, and I think that's a good message to have. So, Pastor Elwin, do we need polls? I mean, really, the purpose of polls, as Duke mentioned, is to kind of sway public opinion. Do you think we need polls?
Again, integrity is a big deal. And if you don't have integrity in the polling system, then you don't need it. It doesn't do you any good. In fact, Tucker Carlson had a good interview last night. He said these guys should be fired on the spot because it not only affects the polling industry, it affects everybody else, newscasters who rely on that. They do their reporting based on polls. He said these guys should be fired. And, if it's for monetary gain, that's why they're doing it. And you have so many because now it's a competitive business. And we got to give you the numbers that you're looking for, otherwise you never hire us again.
Right.
So that cuts against integrity. And therefore, if it's like that, then no, you shouldn't. And candidates, they have their own internal polls anyway. They run
Exactly.
your own internal polls. You know what you're looking for. You get a better idea.
Well, I'm my best pollster, man. I do that all the time. Hey, Eva, you're going to have a good day today? You're going to have a good day. I mean, that's how it works for me.
Because if a person is dependent on polls to determine how they're going to vote, then they're not doing their job about doing your homework.
Right.
All they're looking at is it's a popularity contest versus one based on who can do a better job.
And like I said, there's so many factors involved, right? So many. But one of the things that people usually run for bigger, when I say bigger, wide, like not a state house race or a local race, but statewide race or national race, they will commission a poll before they get into the race. And I can tell you, polls are very expensive. They're not cheap. They're very expensive. And they will commission a poll, and then based on that, they'll make their well, not just solely on that, but on other factors. But that's a big part of it. So very few candidates who will enter a statewide race or a national race will enter it without doing a poll. So are polls going to stay around? That's your question, right? Yeah, they're going to stay around. But I think the general population, the public in general,
Well, I
there's very
think
little
what people are
very little credibility.
right now, again, across the United States, even here in Hawaii, people are upset. I mean, people went to bed last night, regardless of what side you're supporting, hoping for a certain outcome. We wake up this morning, we don't have it, right? Now we have people questioning every process that's going on. Where are these votes coming from, right? So there's so much anxiety and stress going on. So what's the answer? Because we're not going to have an answer today. We're probably not even going to have it in the next couple of days. So what is our advice to people who are just so angry right now at these changing vote tallies across the nation?
That's a good question, and I've been actually trying to not only prepare myself for this, but also others. And all I've been telling them is, look, it's beyond our control. It's all in God's hands, no matter which way it goes. The only thing that we can do, and today one of my readings was about discipleship, is just continue to be disciples that we need to be, and take care of what you need to take care of in regards to your relationship with your God, with your Lord, and also the people around you. How are you going to disciple them, right? How are you going to give them, what needs to be given to them? Because God has a message either way this election goes. There's no question about it. Whether Trump wins or Biden wins, the bottom line to me is that we have a tremendous shift in ideology in America. There's no question about it. No question about it. And it's really a shift that's not in line with my ideology or my beliefs and my faith and my principles. So I have to do that much more. And it doesn't matter whether it's Trump or if it's Biden. I can tell you that I think that's a fact. Likewise, here in Hawaii, I'm so disappointed, and I had a lot of, I guess you could say, enthusiasm and hope that this was going to be an election in which we were going to see things change. And part of the reason for that was because, Keith Amemiya was the Union candidate. That's the way it was portrayed. He was the Democrat, and you'll note this. If you note towards the ending of this campaign, he took the Democrat out of his ads. All his ads just had the Democrat Keith Amemiya. He took that away. And then he also took away his touting of 37 unions are behind me. And what I didn't know, though, I don't know why I didn't know it, but I didn't know that Blangiardi had the Carpenters Union behind of him. I didn't realize that they put that much money into him. So in essence, both candidates were supported by strong union support, right? And I thought that's where the people were going. They were going away from this, right? The incumbency. Hanabusa, Hanneman, and Kim Pine, right? Rejected. Not even close. I'm thinking, okay, maybe we got this shift going. But then I saw what the results basically were, and I'm again going, wow, we got more votes, but it seems like, again, a lot of the new votes were just in line with how mom voted or dad voted or what the history of Hawaii is in regards to voting Democrat. And not really getting into this understanding that we need balance. We need balance. No matter what you say, we need balance. I don't care who it is, right? So anyway, that's my takeaway from all of this. And the hope, the message is really that, look, there's always hope. If we're believers and we believe in God, how can you not have hope? How can you not have faith? How can you not have a smile on your face, right? I mean, you got to have it. So it comes down to us again, and what are we going to be doing in regards to, you know, our discipleship and our mission now. Our mission now. You know, hear people talk about, oh, I got to go to Africa, I got to go to... No, our mission is right here. It's right here with your families. It's right here with your state. It's right here with your community. That's our mission. Let's grab it and let's do something with it.
That's good. And I want to tap onto that and kind of get Jim's thoughts on this too. So people expected there to be this massive blue wave, right? As this anti-Trump sentiment. That's what we were told, right? But that didn't happen. When you look, you really do see a 50-50 kind of split in our nation. So basing what he's saying and bringing this mission and this responsibility we have, I mean, what do you think? What's the positive way that we can start working together? Because even in households, right across the table, you're going to have people that one is blue and one is red. So what's the answer?
So the second half of that really good sermon
is the
second half of that sermon, to put it on a foundation that makes it easier to agree with, because it sounds great and the disappointed people are still disappointed. Yeah, I know God's on the throne, but I'm still disappointed. So the other part of your sermon is, and it's really not that bad, because even if Joe Biden becomes the president until Kamala Harris takes over, they're still not Pharaoh, and we're still not in mud pits taking straw and making bricks and being forced to build pyramids and waiting for Moses to save us out of there. So it's actually easier than it's been for other people of God in history to agree with you and say, yeah, God is on the throne. He knows what's going on, and it's going to be okay.
I love that. And Pastor Elwin, I know that you got some juices flowing as they're talking, so bring us home.
I was just wondering when I'm going to shift this closer to me and you guys sit on that side. But this is what I've been teaching our church, and it really has become something that extends even beyond the election season. And that's having people take the responsibility of looking at God's narrative from beginning to end. That it's not just in this moment, because all throughout the Bible, you will see how God used non-believing leaders of kingdoms, whether it's Nebuchadnezzar, Darius, Cyrus. You know, you go down the line. You know how Potiphar and Pharaoh with Joseph. God always used whoever is in that place. This last week, I taught about the Lord's Prayer, and because what we need now is to pray, and Jesus said this is how you should pray, but it wasn't a memorization script. It was a template on how you formulate your prayer. And the one line that really caught my eye was when he says, "Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven," which causes me to wonder, okay, so what's going on in heaven? Because if I'm praying, I got to pray that heaven comes to earth. And that is when God is in full control. That is where there is no darkness. There is only light. And we should be praying for that, even in the midst of what we're going through right now. That there'll be fruit on the tree, and the leaves will be used for the healing of the nations. We should be praying all of that stuff now, regardless of who's in charge. Mm-hmm. I think a heavy burden is going to be placed on the Democrat Party. And regardless of whether Biden wins or not, you still got the House, because they've been saying Trump is not a person to unify the country. Mm-hmm. All right? You got it. What are you
but they'll just blame the people that disagree with them. Whoever disagrees with them.
That's kind of been the narrative, and that's why it's so disheartening, right? Because they come out and they talk about unification and all of this, and yet if you come out and you just ask a question or even give a little critique, you're not with the plan.
Well, I think
you're just not with the plan.
That's good, and I want to talk about that, because people that are listening and watching, they're feeling this push and pull, right? Because Republicans, for the most part, people are not expecting them to go on these protest rampages if Biden is announced as president. And yet people are thinking that the opposite is going to take place if Trump is
Here's what I'm fearful of. My biggest fear isn't about Democrat, Republican. That changes over every 4 years, every 2 years, midterm elections. That has a process of trying to right a wrong. That's built in the process. Here's what I'm afraid of. There is a third party element that's out here. It's called anarchy. And they don't care whether you're for Trump or for Biden. What they're about, and you hear the words being used, they're here for a revolution. They want to overturn everything that is in the Constitution. They want to overturn everything that is part of our history. All of the pulling down of statues, etc. It's a revolution, and that word has been used again and again, and is supported by big money to support a revolution. And so, regardless of who wins, my biggest concern is the rioting and stuff that you're seeing in the streets. I mean, they found this truckload of explosives in one of the riots. Somebody's funding all of this, and it's not Democrat or Republican. There's a third party out here that.
Yeah, you hit it right. You hit it right on the head. That is exactly right. There's no question that is happening right now, and that's why you heard the narrative from the Republicans talking about AOC and the gang, right? And and I don't know how many people out there have time to look at this, but somebody mentioned to go look at this documentary from the Catholic television in regards to Saul Alinsky. And I think that name will ring a bell with some people, but Saul Alinsky goes back to the 60s, I believe, 50s and 60s. He was an atheist, a community organizer, right, who actually is the heart of this anarchy that we have now. In other words, what I'm trying to say, and add on to what Pastor Elwin said, is that this is not something that has just happened overnight. Yeah. This has been a movement from way back then with Saul Alinsky and the boys, the communist parties, the socialists, as they call themselves. And they even have a clip in there from when they used to have meetings all the time. They had conventions at Madison Square Garden. And they had one clip, audio clip of the president at that time. I can't remember his name right now, but he said, we will take America. Socialism will take America, but we can't do it in the name of socialism because the American people will not allow that to happen. So we will do it under the name of progressive. We will do it under the name of democracy. But take it, we will. And this is exactly where we're going. And this is why I say we need to understand that and continue to be disciples.
The irony of it is a lot of things that the State Department has done in other countries to create democracy in dictatorships is taking over the media, funding it with money, having the military being a part of it. They're using the same tactics in what we're seeing now.
And you know what's interesting? The only group of people that can really understand the dangers of socialism are the Cuban. And in Florida, they went strongly for Trump.
Yes, they did.
And a lot of the speculation is because they are one of the few groups of people that can really see how bad this could be for our nation to go in that direction. So why do you think that we're not listening to them?
Oh, because of social media. That's a big part of it. And the young people right now, they're caught up in all of this, right? Let's just take Black Lives Matter. Okay, the organization itself is something that, if you really know what it's about, I believe the majority of Americans would say, wow, no, I don't really believe in their ideology and where they're going. But yet, the young people have just embraced it and taken it on without even, no thought of it whatsoever. And so has Major League Baseball, the NBA, and NFL. And they've taken it on. So you have these young black athletes, right, who are, and they're young. They're in their 20s and their 30s. They have no idea of what racism is all about. But they're talking about the inequities of it all in America and the systemic, racism that we have in Hawaii. And yet here they are collecting their $120 million paycheck and all the endorsements and everything else they got. They live in some posh neighborhood. And they're talking about systemic racism. If there was systemic racism because of the color of your skin and you were black, tell me how they would be collecting a check of $120 million with all the endorsements and playing,
How would we have elected Obama? It ain't happening.
Well, I mean, that's what I mean. And we can go down the line, right?
Yeah.
So what the pastor mentioned is exactly right on point. And this is why I wanted to make this point. This is why balance, good or bad, makes a difference. Because the Republicans will keep control of the Senate. And so what that means is that you cannot have, nothing will just go right through. These tax reforms that Biden's talking about, his Green New Deal, all of this is not going to just happen.
Well, yeah,
and this is why Hawaii is the way we're at. I tell you, I cannot believe that what we've, the issues come up again, right? Homelessness, cost of living, right? Rail, down the line in Hawaii. And we elect the same people. Yeah. I heard them talking about last night about putting Hanabusa in Blangiardi's administration.
Yeah, Jim and I always talk about that.
No, what I mean, they're perpetuating.
In Hawaii, it's like you could be a council member, and then you're a legislator, and then you're a senator, and then you run for governor,
Calvin
and then
Say,
it's like the same
good example of that. Carol Fukunaga, good example. All of these guys, right? Will Sparrow would have been. Thank God we got Augie T in there. We'll see what difference he'll make. I think he'll make a great difference, right?
Well,
but let me, because you said something that has to actually really be grabbed by the audience, and that is that this third party wants to tear down the Constitution. So what that actually means is, before the Constitution was put in place, the question was, what's the government to the people relationship in the colonies? What's it going to be? You got states, and you've got the federal government, and we've got to craft the Constitution of the United States to define the relationship between the people and the federal government, who has power to do what. So everybody has their favorite Bible verse. My favorite sentence of the Hawaii Constitution is Article 1, Section 1. All political power in the state resides in the people. You take the Constitution away, that's what goes away. That's why the anarchists want to tear down the Constitution. Mm-hmm. It's the wall protecting us from them. So if you think medieval wars with the castle walls and all that stuff, they couldn't very easily climb over the wall. So they tried to bombard to knock the wall down in order to get in and capture the people on the inside. The Constitution is our castle wall. And if you think of it that way, then when you say they're trying to tear down the Constitution, that's what it means.
Okay, so in the last few minutes we have, I know that you're attorneys, and you're not going to like what I'm going to ask you, but I'm going to ask you anyway, because that's what I do. It's my show. I'm curious. I'd like to get your thoughts. So Trump is announced. We're going to do some speculation, okay? So Trump is announced the winner, and the Democrats take the Senate. So he's the president, and you've got the Dems have the Senate and the House. What does that look like? Duke.
Oh, well, it's going to be just more of the same that you have right now, but probably even more contentious than what you got going on right now, because you're gonna have the only power that the president would have at this point in time. What President Trump would have is the veto power. You're just going to walk legislation through, and if they have that which they're not going to have super majorities, although I'm not sure about the House right now. I don't know which way it's going, but if they don't have that majority, they can't override vetoes. So it's going to be, like I said, more of the same, but just more contentious, because now you got Schumer and Pelosi who are going to have a bigger stage than what they have right now.
Okay, Jim, little different scenario for you. So Biden gets elected and the Senate goes to the Republicans. What's it going to look like?
Well, it's the same scenario, because the way the process works is legislation comes out of the legislature and it goes to the president, and he can veto it. And if the legislature doesn't have the votes to override the veto and make it the law anyway, it doesn't become the law. But I would think that the outcome of that is, in the next election cycle, they'll be going after the Senate, because they'll blame the Senate for everything they passed that the president, they'll be going after the new Pence or whatever, or Don Jr., whoever's going to run, because they'll be passing all this wonderful, perfectly good legislation in their view, and the president's vetoing it all. So they'll just use that as USS Missouri cannons at the presidency in the next election.
Okay, Elwin,
and it doesn't even have to be true.
Okay. And Elwin, so yours is
me the
interesting.
easy one.
Yeah, you're going to be Biden takes the presidency and the Dems take the Senate. So now it's democratically controlled House, Senate, and the presidency.
How do you spell Cuba?
I was going to say, you're talking the state of Hawaii, or you're talking the federal government? You know, when one party controls everything, the voice of the people has been silenced. You know, they just do whatever they want to do. I want to speak a little to the scenarios you gave them.
Sure.
If you were to compare Trump and Biden, I think the question was asked in the last debate by Trump to Biden. You were in there for 8 years and you got nothing of this stuff done. How come? And his response was, it's because we had a Republican Congress. And Trump's response was, you got to go talk with him. You know, if you had a different political party from the president, and Trump is president, I would defer a lot to the businessman experience that he has in building these big empires. You got to negotiate with people that are not on your same side, and he surrounds himself with good, smart leaders. You know, Mnuchin and some of these other guys. Versus Biden would probably get stuck if it's on opposites. If you got the same party, all Democrat, people got no say.
But you know what? There are things that mean a lot to this audience that would be hugely different if the Republicans don't hold the Senate and don't keep the presidency, and that's religious liberty. Because this president has protected religious liberty more in an outspoken and a direct executive order way than any president I've ever seen. I do a lot of religious liberty litigation. He made it really easy for us to sigh some relief during the last 4 years. And if the Democrats control everything, part of tearing down the Constitution is getting rid of religious liberty. It's the First Amendment. And free speech is close by.
And
I
is,
think-
that's a fact.
and
What
I-
you just said is a fact. Everything you said.
And I think that the audience that is going to really be listening to this also want to know this question. How is a Biden presidency going to affect the issue of abortion in this great nation?
Well, from a legal standpoint, I don't think much because of the fact that the Supreme Court is set at this point in time, unless something happens, and you get to appoint another justice. But in regards to just being an advocate, being someone who will champion, the various policies and principles that you have, it'll be a tremendous blow.
But then there's also the Hyde Amendment goes away, which means federal funds
that's
can
what
be used to pay for abortion services.
Policies, right.
Grants will be going more to Planned Parenthood like it used to be under Obama.
Policies.
The Little Sisters of the Poor are going to have to pay for the health insurance. They're going to bring back the mandatory abortion stuff.
Right.
I mean, it's actually
Policies.
You were way underselling it, I think.
Well, no, no. What I meant, the distinction I'm trying to make is when I say legal standpoint is when litigation going or lawsuits going to the Supreme Court, it's not going to make a difference.
Well, the federal government can start suing, like in this whole COVID thing. Attorney General Bill Barr told all the U.S. attorneys, keep your eye on how the state and local governments are infringing religious freedom in the name of COVID in ways that are not equally burdensome to non-religious organizations. So the federal government across the country can initiate lawsuits
Right.
to enforce their view of what abortion rights means.
Right, but ultimately it goes to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court now has been set by this administration in regards to the review of cases such as that. Okay?
Right, but when you're the little sister of the poor
Well,
that
no,
for 12 years
yeah,
have to
no.
deal with this
No, exactly.
federal
Yeah,
government
yeah.
pushing
No,
you down, it's a big deal.
No, it'll be devastating.
So
Yeah,
as we wrap up the show today, we can say this, it's not over. And we just want to encourage people to be patient as the nation goes through these next few weeks, possibly even month or months of uncertainty. I want to leave you on these words of a speech. But over these years, the subject of the speeches, the talks, and the press conferences have become increasingly narrow, focused more and more on what the isolated world of Washington thinks is important. Gradually, you've heard more and more about what the government thinks or what the government should be doing, and less about our nation's hopes, our dreams, and our vision of the future. And the speech goes on to say, it is a crisis of confidence. It is a crisis that strikes at the very heart and soul and spirit of our national will. We can see this crisis in the growing doubt about the meaning of our own lives and the loss of a unity of purpose for our nation. And that was President Jimmy Carter, July 15th, 1979. We'll see you next time. Mahalo, everybody. Thanks, gentlemen.